This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I speak to Dr. Mark Goulston MD, a Los Angeles-based coach and confidant to CEOs and Board Chairmen. He talks to me about reverse engineering of anger, founder coaching, and the difference between visionary thinkers v visionary leaders. Enjoy this episode. Hey, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to have Dr. Mark Goulston. Mark is an MD and is a Los Angeles-based business advisor, consultant, coach, and confidant to CEOs and Board Chairmen. Dr. Goulston's special power is a skill at increasing people's ability to get through to anyone, which is why executives at GE, Disney, and Coca-Cola have him on speed dial. He has appeared on Oprah, The Today Show, and CNN, as well as writing for Huffington Post, Psychology Today, and the Harvard Business Review. In addition to this, he is an FBI and police hostage negotiator trainer, a professor of psychiatry at UCLA for 25 years, and author of 7 books on everything from post-traumatic stress disorder and overcoming self-defeating behavior to how to deal and get through to absolutely anyone. It's my great pleasure to have him on the show today. Welcome, Mark.
Well, glad to be with you, James.
So share with our listeners, I've given them a little bit of an overview about you as a creative individual and as a business advisor, but what's going on in your world just now?
Well, what's going on in my world just now is I'm trying to find a way to lessen violence and anger in the world. And I blog, as you mentioned, at a number of places, and one of my recent pieces was reverse engineering violence back to all the way back through rage, through hurt, through humiliation, all the way back down to maybe initial hurts and fear and anger that wasn't responded to earlier in their life. Because once people hit the point of rage, it's ordained that they're going to act on it. So the key is, what's happening is we're trying to respond to the violence by putting a cap on that. And I agree, we need to create safety to control the violence. And also, when it comes to terrorist acts, we have to kill the head of the snake, the people that are at the heads of terrorist organizations. And many of the followers are just people who are kind of lost and disaffected and disconnected from the world and disconnected from themselves. And so if we can find a way to give them better connections than to extremist groups, we may prevent them from joining them. But part of my approach is I will leave it to the military and police to have their tactics to try to counter violence when it erupts. But I think we need to go back to what leads people down that path.
I mean, and that's a fascinating area. A good friend of mine, Majid Nawaz, who's often, you'll see him on CNN, he wrote a book about being in an organization. It was in his book Tahrir, and he was in prison in Egypt, and then having his kind of road to Damascus experience of realizing that extremism and things like terrorism really are not the way to have the kind of change that he wanted. And he wrote a really fascinating book about why people join organization, whether it's ISIS, ISIL, Al Qaeda, these kind of organizations, or gangs as well, because there's a lot of similarities that kind of go on there with inner city gangs. What are some of the main things that you tend to find when you look at this area and find why people they do start having this kind of cycle of violence in their lives? Where does a lot of it stem from for you?
Well, now most of it is the male mindset. We're seeing some women join, it's mainly males that we're talking about. And some of the things that push males over the edge is when they're feeling a sense of powerless, a sense of humiliation, a sense of being rejected and laughed at. And then what happens is there's a saying that I once heard, is that people who are put down and pushed away find a way to get in and get even. And so there's something in males that, and it's what I would call the power of impotent rage, the rage of powerlessness. And then if you add to that, and this is what makes it so difficult, when you add to that, you have nothing to lose in your current life because you really haven't achieved anything. And when extremist groups say, join us, you'll belong, we will love you, we will actually get you loved by love slaves. And guess what? If you die for us, it gets even better. And so that's a very powerful and seductive promise that's very difficult to counter. That's why you have to get these people early when they're showing signs of that vulnerability, when they're starting to pull away and they're younger and they seem to be gloomy and they seem to be negative. And I think there are ways to break through to get them or help them to open up when they start going down a dark place in their mind, because if they stay there really long, and if they're experiencing, again, humiliation or injustice, all they need is something to push them over the edge.
And for you, where was the kernel of things for you, where you first got interested in learning about how people tick? Obviously, now you're known for some really fascinating work you do in terms of hostage negotiation training and post-traumatic stress disorders and some of these other areas as well. But let's go right back. Where did you first get interested in understanding the psychology and the psychiatry of people?
Well, this may be a little off line for your audience, but hopefully they'll find it somewhat interesting. Initially, I was a suicide specialist. I was a suicide interventionist, and I had seen people who had made multiple suicide attempts and had been hospitalized multiple times. And actually, what happened is I had a mentor who founded the suicide prevention centers in Washington and Los Angeles, and he was at UCLA. And he would consult to inpatients who needed to be discharged but were still suicidal, but they weren't acutely suicidal. I mean, it was part of their personality, but you can't keep them there forever. And the residents in training didn't want to see them because they were still suicidal. So he would do a consultation and refer them to me. So that allowed me the chance to be innovative in trying other ways to get through to them. And so what I realized is that the more academic and more pedantic I sounded, the greater the chance that I wouldn't connect with them. And there was one special incident which I think spawned everything since then, including my book, Just Listen, where there was a woman who had made multiple attempts and had been hospitalized multiple times over the years prior to my seeing her. And I didn't think I was making progress with her. And I'd been seeing her about 6 months. And then there was one Monday after I'd been up for about 36 hours moonlighting in a state mental hospital. So you moonlight to make some extra money when you're early in your practice. And when you haven't slept, things go on in your head. You get in touch with various things and you get out of touch. And we'll call this woman Nancy. And when she was in the room, she never looked at me. She kind of looked 30 degrees to the left or right and just had this emptiness in her eyes. And when I was with her, having not slept, suddenly all the color in the room turned to black and white. And I thought, wow, what's going on? And then the black and white, as I was looking out in the world, turned into a cold chill. And I thought I was having a stroke or a seizure. And I'm a medical doctor. I'm a psychiatrist, not a psychologist. So I did a neurologic exam on myself. I tapped my knees. I put my finger out in front of my face to see if I was having any sort of blurred vision. And then I said to myself, I'm not having a stroke or a seizure. I think I'm actually looking out at the world through her eyes and feeling what she's feeling. So I leaned into it, and it got worse. And it got colder and colder, and it felt the chill all through me. And then, because I was sleep deprived, I blurted out something that normally I wouldn't, that I would normally keep to myself. And I said, Nancy, I didn't know it was so bad, and I can't help you kill yourself. But if you do, I will still think well of you. I'll miss you, and maybe I'll understand why you had to get out of this pain. And I thought, did I think that, or did I say that? And she looked at me, and she stared right into my eyes, and I thought, I just gave her permission to kill herself. And I thought she was going to say, thank you for understanding, I'm overdue. And I said, what are you thinking? And she looked at me, and she said, if you can really understand why I might have to kill myself to get out of this pain, maybe I won't need to. And then she smiled, and she gave up her suicidality. So what happened is I learned how to listen into people versus just listening to them. And people open up, and I'll give you and your audience a taste of it right here, right now, with you, James. If I'm listening to you, you're asking me good questions, asking for information, and we're having that level of dialogue. So if I was listening into you, James, tell me if this is accurate, what I'm hearing between your words is that this is a calling for you, that there is something about bringing creativity and the ability to be creative to your audience that is a real passion. And it's a journey that you're on, and certainly you like doing it for the money, but there's a part of you that would do it even without the money. And it's very important that you bring on guests that are helpful to your audience. My guess is you've had some guests on who were really a waste of your time and your audience's time, and you probably had to find some way to tell them you couldn't use their interview. So is any of that accurate?
Yes, unfortunately it is. I'm not going to mention names at this point, but yes, sometimes we have done interviews in the past where unfortunately we haven't used them simply because the guest hasn't come into it with the thought of actually giving. It's been a what can I receive, what can I get, and that actually makes for a very difficult interview when you have someone that genuinely doesn't want to give.
And so as I continue to listen just into you right now, when you said the word giving, I could feel you leaning into it, and how givers are very important to you, and takers are people that I would say offend you. Is that true?
That would be pretty true, I would think.
Yeah. So can you feel the difference? And so I was telling the story, but it's possible for all of us to listen into other people. And in fact, one of my favorite quotes comes from a British psychoanalyst named Wilfred Bion. And he said the purest form of listening is to listen without memory or desire. Because when you listen with memory, you have an old personal agenda that you're trying to plug people into. And when you listen with desire, you have a present or future personal agenda that you're trying to plug them into, but you're not listening to them. And in my book, Just Listen, I talk about try to be a PAL. PAL stands for purposeful, agendaless listening. Purposeful, agendaless listening. And your purpose is really to get deeper and deeper into the other person and find out what matters to them. They may not even know what matters to them, and then be of service. And that's how I live my life, is to do exactly that. And then what I try to do is find the people who help the world and then build relationships with them. And when I run into people who are takers, not givers and not reciprocators, I tend to cut my relationship with them.
And I mentioned at the top of the show, you also are a bit of a confidant to CEOs and board chairmen, very senior level as well. When you're working with them, why do they come to you in the first place? What can you give and give to them that they can't get from maybe business coaches or personal coaches, or other types of people? What are you able to add that other people can't?
Well, in the same way as I was able to look out of at the world through Nancy's eyes, when I'm a confidant to CEOs and founders, and currently my focus is on helping founders become CEOs as opposed to having it fall out once they get a big investor. And so when I listen into people and I'm accurate, what they say to me is, I can't hide from you. I hide from everyone. I even hide from myself, and I can't hide from you. And initially they say, I say, is that good or bad? They say, it's weird. I don't think it's bad, but it is weird. And then what happens is people will come in and we'll have a conversation. And again, when I'm advising, I'm not like a coach who says, what's your goal in a year and 3 years, and then keeps your feet to the fire. What happens when we have conversations, there is about a 80 to 90% chance that you will leave the conversation looking out at your world slightly differently and seeing other options that you never saw because you were stuck in your paradigm. Now, what you do with that is up to you. And if I'm advising people and they see things that really could be a great shift for them in terms of what they're innovating or what they're working on, if they do nothing with that for 3 meetings, I say this is probably not a good use of either of our time.
And then you've written, and you've also given talks about the genius of Steve Jobs. You were talking just there about the founders, turning founders into CEOs. And sometimes that can be a very difficult path for many founders because they're having to move from that kind of almost lone creative genius or very small group to switching up things and becoming more in that executive role. When you looked at someone like Steve Jobs, we often think is that classic example of a creative who not just has helped build great products, but has helped build a great company and has completely changed the way that people live. What do you think made him that kind of great creative leader and disruptor?
Well, it's interesting. I make a distinction between visionary thinkers and visionary leaders. I think Steve Jobs was a visionary thinker, but he wasn't a particularly visionary leader. And here's the distinction. There's a blog that I wrote called The 3 Ds of Visionary Thinking and Visionary Leading. And the 3 Ds are, the first one is you define reality. So Steve Jobs was able to define reality at saying, if we can make technology, specifically computers back then, if we can make them simple, reliable, and beautiful, we will own the B2C market. We will shift technology from B2B to B2C, and he was right. So the first thing is defining that reality. The second D is declaring your intention to do so. So Steve Jobs had a clear picture of what that looked like and felt like, but he couldn't build it himself. So he would recognize it when he saw it, and when it had an on-off switch that he didn't like, he'd kick it out, even if it cost millions of dollars. And the third D is decide strategy. So what is the strategy to make it happen? Now, the difference between a visionary thinker and a visionary leader is a visionary thinker, when they think of strategy, they really don't take into consideration empowering their people. So the reason Steve Jobs got away with it, and to a certain extent Jeff Bezos is getting away with it, and Elon Musk, who also can be very difficult CEOs, is that you get to be part of the future. And so you will give up not being treated in the most respectful way if you get to be part of the future. But those people are the rare, those are the exceptions to the rule. Now, a visionary leader is someone who has the first 3 Ds, but when they're deciding strategy, they know the strategy has to really enroll their people, has to engage them, has to impassion them. And so rather than bullying their people and driving fear in their people, they have a way of uplifting them and motivating them. And I think of, in that blog that I wrote, and I also write for something called Biz Journals, and if you look up Biz Journals, Mark Goulston, you'll find my blogs there, and that goes to 43 cities in America. What I talked about is how Richard Branson is somewhat of a visionary leader because he seems to like people. He seems to care about people. Now, he may not be the same visionary thinker in terms of brand new stuff. He just made what was out there more fun and more engaging. What I proposed, and I don't know if it's true, is that Mark Zuckerberg could be in transition from visionary thinker when he was kind of arrogant and very much like the Social Network portrayed him in that movie. He may be turning into a visionary leader, and I think that's because he's married to a wonderful woman. They had 3 miscarriages before they had a child. So I think he's learning the importance of people, the importance of pain, the importance of that people are more than just functions. And it'll be interesting to see, because he's still young, it'll be interesting to see if he evolves into a visionary leader.
So on that basis, you believe that it's possible for our personalities as leaders, as creatives, to develop and change over time. It's not something, sometimes we hear these things like someone was talking to me the other day about a Myers-Briggs, very traditional kind of personality testing where you find if you're, and I can't remember all the acronyms, but a ZWXY, for example, and that means you're this. And so people get very focused on that is who they are, that kind of defines them. So what you're talking about there is actually possible to really develop that personality. It's not a static thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's the exception. People don't do what's important to them. They do what they care enough about. It's important for me to eat healthily, but I don't care enough about it to eat as healthily as I should. And I think what happened with Mark Zuckerberg is, if you read about his relationship with his wife, Priscilla Chan, she is an amazing woman, and if you read anything, you can sense that he absolutely adores her. And my guess is when she had 3 miscarriages, she probably went through great psychological pain, and that mattered to him. That wasn't just some left brain analytical solution that he could just pawn off. My guess is that pain of loss got to him. In fact, he wrote this blog about that. So I think what needs to happen in your life is that a situation gets through to you, almost to your core, and it sort of flips the switch. And so what happened with Nancy was, what I realized is that when I hacked into her and saw the world through her eyes, and she didn't feel so alone, and I wasn't judgmental about her suicidality, she gave up her suicidality. And so what's transitioned is now I can hack into people like Steve Jobs and look into the world through his eyes. And I've been speaking around the States on how to see your world through Steve Jobs' eyes.
And you've had these series of books. You've had Get Out of Your Own Way, Just Listen, and talking to Crazy as well. Where do you go personally to find and kind of develop new ideas, things that you want to speak about, things that you want to write about? Where does your inspiration come from?
Well, I think something that I don't see myself as a visionary, but something that I think I shared with Steve Jobs, and is also somewhat of a negative part of it, which a lot of entrepreneurs share, is I have a joy of discovery. Meaning, I love discovering something brand new that I've never discovered before, and I am drawn to that. Now, the problem is how to stay focused on that. And a lot of entrepreneurs tend to drive the people around them crazy because they, as we say in the States, they keep running after shiny objects. And so, what I think has kept is that I am my curiosity about the world around me and how it works and why it works the way it does, and how to solve the most pressing problems facing us. And now it's the most pressing problem, it seems to be, how do we turn around the anger in the world and the fear and stop it from turning into violence?
And in this journey you've had, as obviously from the background in science, but also as a thought leader, as advisor, speaker, as author, can you talk to us about a time when you worked on a project, you gave it your heart and your soul, but for whatever reason it just didn't work out like you'd hoped? And more importantly, what were the lessons that you took away from that experience?
Well, I can think of some experiences where I got so close to caring about a particular CEO that I became more of his advocate in my mind than looking at him through the eyes of really what the board wanted from him and what they needed him to be. So what had happened is I got caught up in his view, which I think had a lot of legitimacy to it, but basically what the company needed from him was something different. So even though we connected very well and will be lifelong friends, he was at one point he was told it's just not working out, and he terminated. So that's why I have to balance now. So what I now do is I focus on what is the mission of the enterprise. And one of the interesting things about, by the way, working with founders and turning them into CEOs is often a founder will be someone who is a visionary of the particular product or service that they've invented, and they develop it to a certain point where they get investors. And often if they get a significant investment, what will happen is they want to see if they have the leadership chops to go from founder to running the company, and the majority don't. But a lot of these founders would like to run their company because it was their company. And often what will happen is their board, the board of the people that have invested in that founder, will often see that one of the tests of that founder is they have to terminate a co-founder who they've been loyal to. They've been loyal to each other. When they first started their company in whatever garage it was, there was this naive commitment. We will do this forever. Well, it often turns out that one of the co-founders can be along for the ride, and the other one is just above their level of capability and competence. And often what will happen is when you get outside investors, one of the tests whether you can be a leader is can you make those tough decisions? And it's very difficult for a founder to terminate a co-founder when there was that promise, we'll be in this together forever.
And it's funny, I've been in that situation a number of times previously in the music industry, where I've been maybe in a situation with an artist, let's say, or a band, where they've been signed a significant record deal, and the record label of essentially the investors have said, listen, that drummer or that bass player, it's not really right for the overall thing we want to do, and then they kind of put it onto the artist to kind of deal with that. And more recently, I was advising a company in the US, and they had very similar, two very very good founders, but they got to that point with the board. Put it onto the lead founder to make that decision, and it was very very difficult for that person to do that. When you're being brought on to really work on that position of founder kind of coaching, I suppose, are you being brought on by the board, by the chairman, by the CEO? Where's it coming from?
Well, and this is my challenge. What will happen is the board will tell the founder, you need some help with this. And often I love these founders. I love that they have the joy of discovery. But when the board is telling them, you need to be able to become a leader. You need to stop hiding in your specialty. Otherwise, just take the check we're giving you and go make widgets, and we'll bring in people to run your company. And so it will often be the board that says, you need to do this. But what I'm working with is founders who love that idea. One of my favorite anecdotes was an anecdote where General Norman Schwarzkopf told Brit Peter Samuelson, when they founded the Starbright Foundation along with Steven Spielberg, Schwarzkopf told Samuelson, he said, do you know what a general does? And Samuelson said, well, I don't. And Schwarzkopf said, when you become a general, you have to take off all your specialty pins. You have to take off infantry, tank, whatever it is, because when you're a general, you're a generalist. And you have to be committed to the mission, and you're no longer your specialty. And if you come from your specialty, you'll be shortchanging the mission. So that's why often a founder who may be really creative and inventing, he or she has to decide whether they want to become a leader, which means they can't approach the company as a technologist or a salesperson or a financial person. They have to be dedicated to what's in the best interest of the entire enterprise.
And that's a great story. I'm really fascinated about that difference between the technicians, I suppose, and the generalists. And for years we've been told that people need to get more and more specialized, more and more technical in their abilities, but there seems to be a bit of a resurgence in the generalist, in the kind of Ben Franklin view of doing things, about how being able to take that kind of step back and not get completely lost in your speciality, that you can really you can lead from where you need to lead in the field.
That's exactly true. I'm part of something at USC, the University of Southern California. They have something called the Third Space Initiative, and they've done research that shows that there's going to, I think, a $1.5 trillion talent gap in people lacking the ability to cross silos, the ability to cooperate and collaborate. The people become so specialized between organizations, in organizations, that they can't get anything done when they're trying to bring all the silos together. And so this comes from the Annenberg School of Communication, and their research is quite compelling that you need people with those skills to bring everyone together. And boy, when you look in the world, when you look at Brexit, when you look at America, we need that everywhere.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've noticed even when I originally did my my MBA many years ago, it was actually a relatively generalist type of qual master's program because you had to deal with all different things. And I've noticed in the past, really 5-10 years, for MBA students, they're very specialist MBAs, and I've often worried that the people kind of going in and doing those qualifications, they go so far down the rabbit hole that they just lack. They lack maybe the perspective, and sometimes there's lacking the empathy in terms of what people are having to go through in some of the other kind of functions of organizations.
So, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So in this really fascinating journey you've had as a creative, can you tell us about any insights or light bulb moments, those moments in your life where you've made a new distinction, or maybe you've recognized maybe this is a direction that your career needed to go in? Can you tell us about any of those insights?
Well, this will make you laugh, I believe. I used to be an empath, meaning I would tune into people to disarm them, to stop them from destroying someone else and destroying themselves. And so my whole goal was, how do I get inside people and flip a switch in which they turn over a gun or they turn over their suicidality? And what's happened is, since I've been hanging out with entrepreneurs, I've been able to become a little bit of a visionary myself. And what I've realized is the clearer my vision and the clearer the opportunity in front of me that's mine for the taking, the more impatient and less empathic I've become with people. In fact, when I speak to entrepreneurial communities, and I do this every time, and I say, I know the word, and these are entrepreneurs, I know the single word in business that you can't stand more than any other word. And they look at me and they're kind of defiant. What do you can't read our minds. And I said, the word you can't stand more than any other word in business, if you're an entrepreneur, is people. Because people feels like it's going to be attached to an excuse. It feels like an HR type of thing. And they just start laughing. And I say, see, gotcha. But you have to be able to do something with people, because people are not appliances. They're people. And you resent it.
I definitely sense that when I worked in Silicon Valley for a number of years, and there was definitely a feeling if they could get a technology to do something, then that would be the first thing, and the people part, and especially I think amongst. I've seen this a lot with it amongst engineers, I would say, and also I've seen it a lot amongst songwriters as well for some reason. Not so much performing musicians, but more with songwriters who do that job and do that role simply because they love having that really focused time, and they don't have to do many kind of interactions with people. So, especially, I would imagine you're dealing with a lot of founders, and imagine a fair number of those are going to be technical founders as well. They have a real technical expertise in what they were doing, but they're having to now adapt to becoming those visionary thinkers, those visionary leaders you're talking about.
Absolutely. There's someone I may coach, but we'll see. We'll see if the person hires me. And this person could be the next Mark Zuckerberg. They dropped out of Harvard after a couple of years in their early 20s, and they founded and sold a few companies. But what's fascinating about this person is they can get the interest of investors, and so they can speak like a business person, but they're technologically incredibly smart. And I said to this person, here's your challenge. When you get into too much of your technical expertise, business people's eyes will glaze over, and they're giving you their money mainly because you have a good track record. But when you get into this passion that you have about the technology and how and why it works, You're turning off business people who just care about the bottom line. On the other hand, so they like your confidence and you have a good track record so far. If your track record goes down, they're not going to be that impressed with you. And here's the problem. When you come in and you're dealing with technologists, you have to ratchet back the fact that you're in this warp speed, because you talk all over them and they will be like deers in the headlights of a car. And you'll think they're understanding everything that you're saying at warp speed, and then they won't. You'll get frustrated with them, and you won't be able to help them achieve, and they're not going to push back on you. Engineers and technologists are very conflict avoidant, and when a founder is running on momentum and adrenaline, they're not going to interrupt you, and you think they're going to understand you, and you haven't been that clear. So you're going to need to be able to. You're going to have to be like a hybrid car. You're going to have to quack like a duck when you're with different ducks. And the person started laughing, and they said, do you think I can do it? And then I said, if you care enough about it, you will. If you don't, you won't.
So you now coach founders, next generation of founders, but what's one of the best pieces of advice that you've ever received about really living a creative life and living a life that really kind of gives you great joy and pleasure?
Well, I'm a lot older than a lot of the people I coach, and coaching them or advising them keeps me young. And something that I discovered, which I wish I had discovered 30 years ago, because I would have had more time to work on it, is I've discovered some of the calling I have in life. And the calling I have in life is to lessen violence, anger, and fear, and make the world safe for humanity. And so there's an exercise that I give people, and I say, if you can imagine your personality is a circle, and in that circle are the parts of your personality that are trying to prove, show, hide, or please. Prove something, show something, hide something, or please someone. And if you eliminate all of that from the circle, what's left? And actually what's left is you. And many people say, if I eliminate prove, show, hide, please, there's nothing left. And so what happened is, 10 years ago, I eliminated prove, show, hide, or please, and there was a calling waiting for me that had been there for over 30 years, but I just didn't hear it. And the calling was, Mark, you're able to tune into people. You're able to tune into people who are enraged and violent. You're able to flip a switch, and you're able to save them and save the world from destruction. You need to be doing this because the world is getting worse. And so that became my calling. And I love helping founders because it's kind of like I got to pay my bills, but my real calling is going out there and disarming and diffusing all the rage and violence in the world.
And a very worthy calling that is, especially in, unfortunately, the world environment that we're living in today. So as we start to finish up here, are there any online resources or tools or apps that you love and that you often suggest to people?
Well, I would direct people, this is slightly self-serving, but why not? If you go to BizJournals, BizJournals.com, or BizJournals Goulston, Goulston. What's happening is I'm putting out all my intellectual property. There's a number of full programs in each of the blogs because I just have too much and I'm not a withholding kind of person. So I think if you go there, there's a number of tools that people will find helpful. One that people seem to like is the 12 steps for keeping consultants and consultations on track. And I give this to every CEO I work with. And when I'm advising consulting companies, I say you need to use this because what it'll do with your client, it'll show them how you do your consultation. And the 12th step is disengagement. Because a lot of times companies will not hire a consultant because they're afraid they won't be able to get rid of them. That they will come in and they will upsell all the way through your company. You'll never get rid of them. So the 12 steps is a way of showing how to do a consultation. And what will happen is it'll lessen the nervousness of a client about hiring you because you'll be there to solve a specific problem and they won't be worried that you're going to go in there and metastasize through the company.
Well, definitely put the links. People go to jamestaylor.me and just type in Mark Goulston. You're going to get the links for these as well. And what about if you could only recommend one book and one record, one album to our listeners? What would they be?
Well, I'm going to date myself, but I am a Beatles fan, or a John Lennon fan, and it shouldn't surprise you, and I get emotional where I'm coming from. Of course, the song and the world I'd like to create is Imagine by John Lennon. And in terms of books, I have a number of favorites. One that's not well known and was co-written by my late mentor Warren Bennis, who was one of the top people in leadership, is called Judgment. I think it's How Smart Leaders Make Good Judgment Calls. He co-wrote it with Noel Tichy, Tichy. And basically what he said is that you have to be able to make good judgment calls in three areas. One is about the people you pick, the strategy you choose, and during crisis. And if you make bad judgment calls, you're not going to get anywhere. In fact, I think I threw a blog out, either the Huffington Post or somewhere, that what we need to do is we need to examine any of the presidential candidates about their track record when it comes to choosing people to execute certain things, strategies, whether the strategies actually work, and how do they deal with crisis. And what's their track record? Because their track record of their judgment calls in those three areas in the past is going to predict how they're going to be in the future. And it'd be really interesting, I think, if we examined all candidates, including the PM in Great Britain. That wouldn't be a bad way to vet people. But it's a great book, and I think it teaches you how to make better judgment calls.
Well, that's great. We'll put that on the show notes here as well. So final question for you. Let's imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So you have the tools of your trade and the knowledge that you've acquired over these years doing what you do, but you have no contacts. No one knows who you are. How would you restart?
I would... it's often easier to reverse engineer from a very specific vision of success 5, 3, and 1 years from now. And so the more specific I could see what that would look like, what would be the greatest vision of success for me, and that could be both in business, interpersonally, any way I defined it. And I get as granular as possible, and then I would reverse engineer from that. What would I need to do to make that so? And also, I think you really need to nurture your contacts and build them, because you can't do anything alone. And the quality of your relationships and you looking out for other people and they looking out for you and you looking out for them, what's in their best interest, and vice versa. I can't stress that enough. And there's a problem for a lot of technical people, is that they're all emotionally shy. They're not good. They're not good socially, and often they, without knowing it, they can bore other people when they go on and on about their technology, and they don't pick up the hint that nobody's listening anymore. So I think nurturing a really effective network of people, and then also developing those skills so those people will want to be around you, because if you turn out to be really boring, overly technical to people that want to get away from you, they're not going to want to network with you.
And that reminds me a little bit, I've just finished reading Charlie Munger's book, who's worked with Warren Buffett. And what you just mentioned about reverse engineering, he had a great phrase which he said, invert. Always invert. Go back, work it out from back the way. So, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We could have gone on and on because it's really fascinating, the areas that you have an interest in and a passion and you speak and you write about. What's the best way that people can learn more about you and the books and the writing and the other projects you have going on?
Well, you can... my Twitter address is @MarkGoulston. I have about over 70,000 followers, so you can join the merry pack there. Or go to markgoulston.com. I guess I'm considered a thought leader. I can't say that about me, but other people have. You said it in the introduction. But if you go to markgoulston.com, and actually there's a link that says free stuff. And so if you put your email in that, which I don't share with anyone, you'll get all kinds of things, and that'll automatically put you into my email broadcast, which goes out every week.
Wonderful. I'll put all the links there as well. Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show. I wish you all the best. We could have gone on. I know you're involved in some other alchemy, and there's a whole bunch of other cool things you're involved in, which people can go and find out about the website. But I wish you all the best with that calling, with that mission that you have.
The same to you, James, and you need to do that circle test sooner than later.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.